Okay. If you haven't messaged your mom yet, me neither. I'll message her later. You don't want to message your mom too early in the morning because there'll be a lot of messages coming for the rest of the day. So once she sees that you're awake, it starts. I phone my mom most Sundays driving home from church. I get in the car and phone. For a number of reasons. Number one, it's a good routine. Otherwise, I forget. Secondly, I tell her from the outset, I've got 4 minutes till I'm home. Don't tell me the stuff you told me last week. Yeah. I noticed my brother's just letting me hang out to dry there on my own. No? Not a single affirmation of that strategy. Anyway, I'll share that with you for free. So we're several weeks now into this topic of living light and free, living according to the unforced rhythms of grace. And so if we just go to the next slide quickly, this is the verse of scripture that it's based on. Jesus offers this unbelievable invitation to you and I. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. He says, I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. If you keep company with me, you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I switched those two words around because it sticks in our minds better. The idea of living light and free, and that it's an invitation from Jesus. Over the last several weeks, we've looked at a few topics, and we'll continue for a while yet. But so far, we've covered the powerful idea of the assurance of salvation, of knowing that you know that you know that you absolutely know that you are secure in your walk with God, that heaven is your home, that if you were to breathe your last breath here, you would breathe your next one there, and that is a very real and very dear promise that God has made to his people. And when we get that, we live light and free in this world a little bit. Secondly, we looked at handling hardship, having a healthy understanding of when things go wrong. Because when we handle hardship well, I believe we can live light and free. Last week, I made the point that I think living light and free is relational, but it's not casual. Spoke a little bit about reverence, about how that can feel like a heaviness, that God is to be feared and to be deeply respected. That can feel like contrary to the idea of living light and free. But if you weren't here last week, you'll need to catch it on YouTube. But the idea actually is that there is a tremendous comfort and a freedom that comes from having boundaries that God has set. And so light and free is relational, but not casual. This week, I have an idea of a topic that I want to cover. I want to speak about the power of forgiveness in helping people to live light and free. C.S. Lewis once said this: everyone thinks forgiveness is a great idea until they have something to forgive. Everyone thinks forgiveness is a great idea until they have something, and I add in there, hard to forgive. So this morning I want us to do that. I want us to leave here still pursuing a life of light and free, because that's what Jesus invites us into. But how does forgiveness play into that? I want to do things just a little bit differently, and so I'm not going to offer a monologue this morning. I'm going to invite in a moment someone up to share the platform with me. And I've asked him to help me with the topic. He's agreed. I'd originally asked him to preach on it. He came up with the idea of a discussion. I think it's a very good one. I think it'll work well. So it's a slightly different format. Incidentally, when you study the life of Jesus, you'll see that he taught in many different formats. At times it was an address to a group. At times it was one-on-one discussion. At times it was a Q&A. Mostly questions he refused to answer from the religious elite, and often questions he asked of others. And so this morning I want you to not be rattled, particularly if you're visiting with us. This is just another expression of a way that we can learn how to live the life that God wants for us. So, I'm going to ask you to help me to welcome, how about that? I'm going to ask you to help me welcome Reta up, if you'll take a seat over here. So this is Reta Bile Olifant. Reta, why don't you join me up here? And just check if that mic's it's on here. Just make sure it's on there. Hello. Ah, cool. All right. So I know all of Reta's names because I married him in Zamani. Senyatso Retabile Olifant.
Yeah.
So feel free to use his full names if you speak to him later. Give you a quick background in case you don't know anything. So Reta is husband to Zamani. He is father to Kai, and I would consider Reta a very devoted follower of Jesus. He also is one of the most transparent pilgrims on his Christian faith that I think I've ever had the privilege of meeting. You remember the last time Reta spoke here, there was not a dry eye in the house as he just shared of his journey. And so when I thought about forgiveness, I thought Reta brings a skill set to that, but this transparency to it as well. And so we actually don't really have an idea where this is going to go. So if you're nervous, so are we. What I do know is we'll finish on time. So won't you just go with us for a little bit? Reta is a practicing psychologist, so I feel he can offer a fresh perspective on this whole idea of what a healthy soul, what a healthy soul should be valuing, and to use the sermon series of this, or the language of this series, a soul that's light and free. What's it valuing? What's it pursuing? Particularly today, we want to touch at most on forgiveness. But more than that, Reta, start us off just this question, because your reply to me, you like the light and free phrase.
Yes.
What does light and free mean to you?
Jeez, man. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay. So you started me with a heavy one. What does light and free mean? I think probably for me, in my relationship with God, in my journey, I have found that being light and free, in my relationship with God has to do with the humility to receive. There's the humility to receive my identity from Him, the humility to receive unconditional love, the humility to receive, how can I put it, to allow yourself to genuinely believe how God sees you, to believe how God feels about you, to believe how God wants to treat you, to take Him seriously. Yeah. To take Him literally, say, that's how you see me. I'm going to allow myself to believe that. And that once you do, everything changes.
But it is hard.
Yes.
Which brings me to my second question. If you thought the first one was tough, in a world where heavy and burdened is most people's normal, and you would see this in your professional life,
Absolutely.
Heavy and burdened is normal.
Yeah.
Is it fair or even reasonable for a Christian to still expect Jesus in a world of burdened and heavy? Is it still doable now, 2,000 years after he said these words, for us to live light and free? Can it still, is there traction even now?
Is it still like, is it still viable?
Yes.
Are you asking? I think it's more viable than it's ever been. I think it's more viable than it's ever been. I think the hunger for it is heavier. The thirst for it is more driving than it's ever been. Look, I do have a train of thought that I had about this. I just haven't had the mental capacity to sustain it into a sermon. But there is a there,
Yes.
right? So just maybe I think this is gonna matter. I think it's some context to what it is that I'm about to say. There's two thoughts that I had when I was coming in here. I was driving and I was arriving, and already there were cars parked outside. And I was walking in and I saw Tina getting out of the car with her kids. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try and look for parking. I'm just going to park outside. And then as I was getting out the car, I was thinking, what a lovely problem to have. This is such a good problem to have. Like, I can't find parking at church. a thought that I had when I was sitting down here, talking about the context of Mother's Day, was the fact that after this, for example, I'm going to be going to a gathering in Newlands into Zoom, where there's going to be Zamani's grandmother, Zamani's mother, and her aunt, Zamani and Sweetie Fair over there, right? I mean, that's a Mother's Day, right? And that's what it's about. So anyway, back to what you were saying. I believe the hunger is there, and it's about the ability, and this is the hard part. It's the ability to give yourself permission to receive the scandalous nature of the way that God sees you. The moment you begin to allow yourself to do that, the moment you do that, everything changes. And in fact, one of the thoughts that I was trying to sustain in my mind that I'm hoping the Holy Spirit and you can help me with that is this thing about the fact that, the only thing that God is asking for, the only thing that's hindering you from your ability to do that, it's this tiny, tiny little thing that God believes you're capable of doing. God believes you're capable of doing that.
Yes.
And He knows that you don't have much to give in it. That the only thing that you're going to be able to give in terms of your ability to receive that, it's a little piece of yourself. And like He says, that's all I need. If you can believe it this much, that little thing that you're capable of, when you do that, that's all I need. That's all I need. But that is hard.
It is hard.
So hard.
I'd like to, right at the end, cycle around to what you'd said. You have this burden about that unique relationship, basically the Bible's narrative of. So we're going to cycle back around to that at the end. But maybe just, and this can get a little bit technical for a while, but this thing of forgiveness. So we'll cycle back around to light and free and what it means, I guess, almost philosophically. But forgiveness, I think, plays a part in the ability to live light and free. So get just a little bit technical. So in your experience, both as a Christian, as a human being, but also in your dealing with people who are on the really heavy and burdensome side of life, maybe people who are seeing you, is it really important to forgive? I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer question, but is it really that important to forgive? I think the answer is going to be yes, but if so, then why does it really matter that much? And why does it matter for us when we get it wrong?
Okay, so by forgiving, I'm assuming we're meaning the obvious of forgiving another person.
Yes, let's
right?
go there first.
Okay, but because I'm going to take it to forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think I have a way of answering that question. It's really important to forgive. This is going to sound so cliche. Is that idea about like forgiving frees you, then it frees more than it frees them. But I'm going to try and explain what I mean by that. There's all kinds of things that'll go wrong in human relationships. And I'm speaking, let's say, specifically for a day like this, in relationships between mothers and their children. Let me use that as an example, right? One of the things that I always say is that all of us have to survive our upbringing. It doesn't matter how awesome it was. All of us have to survive our upbringing. Some people, unfortunately, have an upbringing that is worse than others, but all of us have to survive our upbringing. And there's always something that we have to survive. Now, let's say in the context of your relationship with a parent or relationship with your mom specifically, perfection is off the table. So let's say you even had a really good mom and you had a great relationship with them. There's always going to be a part of them that left you invalidated. So by that I mean validation is key to everything. In order for a person to be healthy, they need to be able to walk about their life feeling that they are being validated. When a Zulu person greets you, when they say sawubona, they're not just saying, I see you with my eyes. They're saying, I'm seeing into you. I'm seeing through you. I'm seeing your inherent worth and your dignity. It's very important for people to be able to live lives where they genuinely feel like they are being recognized. It doesn't have to be all the time, but it's especially from people who matter the most. So I'm saying, even in the best case scenario, your parents, your mom is going to fail to do that at some level that mattered to you in some sort of way. Usually because of the flaws that they had as a person, the kind of upbringing that they had, and the blind spots that it created for them, right? So in order to be able to figure out a way how to forgive them, one of the things that I say is You have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to moderate your relational expectations of them. I may have certain things that I need my mother for, and because of who she is, she failed to be that person for me. Provided that I believe in their character. Best case scenario, I believe they had good character, they weren't trying to be horrible. I'm going to have to figure out a way to adjust for that. If this person can't be that thing that I needed, they were able to do one, two, three, four, five, but number six, they just couldn't hit that note. Um, what do I do with that? Because just because they couldn't be that for me doesn't mean I don't need it anymore. Because I want to love them, I want to be able to accept the good. I want to be able to accept and enjoy and kind of wring out all the goodness that can possibly exist inside them in all these other areas. Let me allow myself to adjust what I expect from them. In order to do that, I have to humanize them. I have to remember that this person comes from somewhere. They have a history, they have a background, they have things that happen to them. And in order to do that, I have to allow myself to kind of step inside their shoes. Um, you learn as much as you can about them. You have to remember that, like, my mom used to be a baby at some point, and she went through things, and things happened, and she survived what she needed to survive, and she became this awesome person. But in other ways, she just she couldn't do certain things relationally, certain things emotionally. And so in order for me to be able to forgive, in order for me to be able to stand a chance of forgiving her, I have to validate her. I have to take myself back. Let's say, I know I can speak for myself. The only reference point that I have is my dad. Um, yeah. And in order for me to be able to have a healthy relationship with my dad, I had to take myself back to the fact that this person was the sixth of like 11 children growing up in dirt poor semi-desert Taung in the northwest province, was put through missionary Catholic schools at the height of apartheid, and he had to fight his way out of poverty into everything that he was able to give us. That is a testament of incredible character, but that has a price. And part of the things that he failed to be for me was the fact that he had to live and pay that price, right? And so my ability to have a healthy relationship with him is to validate him at that level, to get to know him that well, to investigate him, to scrutinize him, to vet him as well as I can, so that when he fails to be those things that I needed, I can do the best that I can to account for that in terms of how I see him, you know. Um, and that allows me to begin to humanize him. I validate him. Therefore, it's easier for me to forgive him because what I'm doing is I'm adjusting what I expect from him relationally. I'm accepting what I need. And the other stuff I'm saying, a couple of things happened here. Either he has no character whatsoever, in which case, or most cases, he can't do this. He's hurt too much in this area, or he's too flawed, or whatever. So in order to spare myself the pain of constantly reaching out for and not getting what I desperately need, in order to stop myself becoming possibly resentful towards him, let me stop expecting that thing from him. Doesn't mean I don't need it. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter. I'm going to validate that about myself. But let me stop needing it from him. Let me go somewhere else about that. Other people, other places, other institutions, God. Um, so that I can have the healthiest, best relationship with him as best as possible. So I'm using my dad, but I'm using his mom's as. And I don't know if that answers the question. So that has to do with forgiving other people.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't have to miss
No, it's perfect. Um, and maybe just take it a little bit deeper. So the Bible makes this case, Jesus, in fact, clearly teaches it, that forgiveness is this two-way street. But he doesn't, it's not you forgive me, I forgive you. His two-way street is, if you don't forgive, God won't forgive you. Let me read it to you, because you look as dismayed as many here are. If you forgive those who sin against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you refuse to forgive others, your Father will not forgive your sins. Hectic. What's your take on that? No, I do think there's a link between what you were saying and this, because it's an issue of the soul. It's an issue of wholeness that we can't get to because there's something within us that we've almost closed a door that God needs to access in order to bring the wholeness that he said he would bring. Now I'm answering the question for you. But what is your take on that? When you hear that verse, with your understanding as you've just described it now of needing to contextualize and indeed humanize people who've hurt us, because now it's almost a link of the earthly, Steve offends me, but now this offense is beginning to affect my spiritual walk. How does that fit into what you're describing, if indeed it does?
I think there's a question in there. Just say that one more time. Just question.
So part of the solution for me forgiving Steve is that I humanize him. But now the Bible is saying there's a spiritual element. There's something within me that will be spiritually hampered if I don't do this. And where does that overlap happen, and how does it happen? And is it as cut and dried as the Bible is describing here, or is there more in it, as you understand it?
Okay.
I meant to send him the questions earlier, but I thought this would be more interesting.
Okay.
I guess it's about we're cycling back to God's desire for me to live light and free, and how can Steve withhold that from me?
Yeah.
And how do I get over that?
Okay. I think I have a train of thought that can take us there. I think a person who, look, I need to. That's why I talk about validation. It's very important. First of all, before I say anything next about a person, I need to validate the fact that, like you said, forgiving is extremely difficult to do. Especially when your skin is in the game. Man, I've been listening. I listen to a lot of podcasts. There's one that I hadn't listened to for a long time. I've gotten back to it. I don't know if anyone here knows Dan Carlin. He does podcasts on and there's one is the latest one that he's just finished. It's called Supernova in the East. It's this giant 6-part, 5-hour a piece podcast where he goes into the granular story of the Second World War in the East, in the Pacific, and about how Japan basically explodes. It goes supernova, like a star, conquers the whole of the East and the whole history behind that, and especially how it ends. And I'm using that as an example because by the time the Second World War ends, it wasn't just a war between nations at a conceptual level. It was personal. If you could compare the ending of the Second World War in physical combat terms, it was that part of the fight where you're on top of the guy and he's helpless, and you're just punching him in the face over and over again, begging him to give up. And in order to be able to get there, you have to have created a level of hate for him, because you have to be able to dehumanize him to that level. So when you talk about being able to forgive, what needed to happen afterwards is the relationships between Japanese people and Americans needed to start getting to a place where they could be humans to each other again. And look, I can think of any number of ways to motivate people to be able to love another person to love another person with whom you've shared that kind of history, as horrible as it is. You can use any number of ways to motivate people. You can use nationalism, you can use humanism. I have not come across a way of inspiring people more powerful than the cross. Because in the cross, you condense the essence of what's gone wrong with humans. And it has to do with the fact that the problems that I'm having in my relationship with you have to do with the fact that I have completely misjudged, I have missed the mark of what it means for me to be human in my relationship with God. And if I genuinely believe, and this is the part that gets very uncomfortable as a Christ follower, if I genuinely believe that you are as much in the image of God as I am, then it obligates me to treat you in a different sort of way. And so that's the part of forgiveness that gets really particularly difficult. Okay. uh, this happens in therapy all the time. I find myself there's a thought that I just had. Okay, okay. Say a question again. Say a question again.
Is it fair that a human dysfunction
Hmm.
or unforgiveness
Hmm.
affects my spiritual life?
Hmm.
And if so, how and how do we reasonably
Hmm.
not allow that to happen?
Yeah.
But authentically so, because we can just go through the motions. I forgive you, I forgive you. But how do you actually get yourself into that space where you firstly believe that this is true, that I actually am not just it's a as you say it's a cliche, but I'm drinking poison hoping that person dies. But now I'm not in drinking poison hoping that person dies. I'm drinking poison and cutting myself off from the only one who can possibly heal me.
Mm.
So this thing it sits for me like a giant obstacle to living light and free
Yeah. Yeah.
in every way, between me and people, between me and God, between me and my parents, between me and my wife. Get unforgiveness wrong. It's a deal breaker to light and free living.
I think to do so is to actually completely underestimate the price that God had to pay to forgive you.
Yes.
That's the only way that you can do that. That's the only way that you can think that God has to do more work for someone else to forgive. God has to do more
Yeah.
work to forgive someone else than he had to do to forgive you.
Yeah.
Is to think that about another person. That's how you get to that place. When the truth of the gospel is that no, you're not special. You're not special. The way that you messed up is just as bad as how they messed up. Whatever you think constitutes messing up, you went there. You went there. Okay. So don't think you're different. Don't think you're special, because the standard that I have for what constitutes messing up is far, far and away above what you think is the standard. The way you messed up, you have no idea. You have no idea.
I think Reta has a gift for encouraging people. And in a moment, I'm going to, I feel like I want to wind up the spring like on those kids' toys and then just take my hand off and just watch it. And so the topic that you had in your heart, if you could get your head around that, because I'd really like you to offload that onto us. But while you prepare your mind, folks, I want to read this passage of scripture. It's a little bit lengthy, but I think it's in many ways the answer. Let me just read it to you, and then Reta will give us that, and we'll begin to head home. Because we're not the first people to have questions about forgiveness. Peter came to Jesus and he asked, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? He thought he was being very magnanimous. I'm willing to go all the way to 7. And Jesus says, no, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Therefore, he says, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with his servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him $1 million. He couldn't pay. And so his master ordered that he be sold, along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned to pay the debt. But the man fell down before the master and begged him, please, be patient with me, and I'll pay it all. His master was filled with pity for him and released him and forgave his debt. But when that man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him only a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and he demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged for mercy like he had. Be patient with me, I'll pay it, he said. But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some of the other servants saw this, they were very upset, and they went to the king and told him everything that had happened. Then the king called in the man he had forgiven and said to him, you evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you? And the angry king sent the man to prison, and then it gets hectic after that. But I think it's such a beautiful illustration of what you're describing. Jesus just says, the reason we don't get forgiveness is we just don't get how much we have been forgiven for. Reta, the big narrative, the faithful husband,
Okay.
the harlot wife.
Yeah. So look, what's, and I believe it's relevant What's been on my heart regarding this idea of forgiveness is, and I will need your help. I need you to ferry me through this idea as I go. But it has to do with, I mean, the Bible is many things. It is many stories. It's, people think that they don't know how to read the Bible. You do know how to read the Bible. If you've ever geeked out on any subject matter, like for me, I'm a sci-fi geek. I'm a Star Wars geek. I'm a Star Trek geek. If you are out there, you're a Marvel geek. Like whatever kind of usually fictional rabbit hole that you're capable of going down, the Lord of the Rings, and you know how to read the Bible because that's how you go through, how you geek out as a fandom in that thing. That's how you read the Bible. That's literally how you read the Bible. But anyway, in my geeking out over the Bible, there are many stories that it's written in there. But if there's one story that I believe resonates throughout, the beginning to an end, is this: the Bible is the greatest love story of all time. It's thrilling. It's an incredible love story. And um, one of God's ways of telling this narrative is by describing it in the idea, in the context of a marriage between a good and faithful husband and his wayward wife. So by that I'm saying there's a good, faithful husband and his wife is cheating, just out there doing the most. Right now, please understand. I need to be very clear when I speak about husbands and wives. I'm not speaking about us humans, men and women. Okay, I'm speaking about God being our husband and us being His bride. Us as in humanity being His bride. So I just want to clear those particular roads very early on. So basically, my understanding of this, if I had to break it down, because I'm building up to this one thing, is you have before what happens in Genesis, you have this perfect marriage between a husband and his wife. They're in a perfect relationship. One of the things that that stood out to me is in Genesis, he said they used to take walks in the cool of the day. You think about what it is that you would do with your wife when you're taking a walk in the afternoon, just chatting, and that's how close God and mankind were. They would just take strolls. And then for whatever reason, I say she, I'm talking about us, she, his wife, allowed herself to believe that the grass was greener on the other side. Someone came and said to her, he's holding out on you. I mean, there's so much more you could know. This happens all the time today in marriages. Um, you could have better, you could have more passion, you could have more whatever it is that you think is not happening enough in your marriage. That's exactly what happened between us and God, and we allowed ourselves to believe that. So what happened. And God, being the holy God that He is, and again, I need you to shepherd me through this, but effectively what happens is that He kicks her out. He kicks us out. He takes our clothes and He's just like, go, you can't stay here anymore. And He kicks us out of the garden, and then our relationship with Him has to begin to change. Now, God, being the good God that He is, He instantly foreshadows what's going to happen next. So He already tells you how the story is going to end. And He says it right there: the seed of the woman will crush the head of the snake. So He says, look, I'm just going to foreshadow this thing. This is what's going to happen. But now I need to tell you the story of how this happens. Because the whole point of this thing is that I'm trying to reconcile my wife to myself. I want to win this woman back. I love this woman, you know, and she's become something that horrifies me. But I love her. I love her. I love her so much. I need to win this woman back. So how does He do that? Now, everything that happened, please understand, I'm not suggesting that God figured this out. I think He allowed things to happen the way that He did for our sake more than His, so that we could understand a point. Um, there's several in my mind. I was thinking, if for the sake of my story, if I could yada 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 my way through the Old Testament, basically what it is that I would say is happening is that it reminds me of the story between Robert De Niro's character and Sharon Stone's character in Casino. Has anyone seen Casino? 1995. You know how he he marries this woman who is a harlot. She is a harlot. Now, I love that word because it comes from the Bible. And it's such a powerful word. It slaps particularly hard for everything that I'm about to say. But she's a harlot. She's a hustler. She's a harlot. Everyone loves her. and she knows how to make money, right? But she's a harlot. And what it is that he's hoping to do was to turn this woman into a wife. Um, but the mistake that this guy makes, this is not a mistake that God realizes, but the mistake that this guy makes is thinking that if I can just give her everything that she could ever want, and he does. He gives her money, gives her jewelry, he gives her the best clothes, walk-in closets, gives her a magnificent house, and for a while their relationship was good, and then it begins to fall apart because her old pimp boyfriend keeps coming back and back and back. The streets keep calling back and back and back. And she can't help herself. She goes back to the streets over and over again. In ancient Near Eastern terms, what you need to understand about the God of the Bible and what makes him different compared to the comparative gods at the time is that the thing that the Israelites, the Jewish people, were claiming about the nature of God was very different compared to what was happening at the time. Generally speaking, the idea of God at the time, first of all, was polytheistic. There wasn't just one God. Most people were polytheistic in their practices. Jews are monotheistic, which is different. Um, and then what they believe is that this God is the supreme God. So they're not just saying that we believe in one God. We are saying this one is the best God. I mean, you can say what you want about your gods, but our God is better than all of y'all. That's that's the claim that they were making, you know. And then in spiritual terms, you need to understand what was happening at the time is that every great city or every great civilization had a whole library of gods that society's people followed, but they usually had a chief god. They had a champion god. So Canaanites generally had the Baal or the Baals. Um, Egypt had Ra. Assyria had Ashur. Babylon had Marduk. So each main civilization had their chief god, their champion. So in economic terms today, phones. The USA has iPhone. USA has Apple. South Korea has Samsung. Um, Japan, they had Sony. um, in car terms, same thing, right? You have your champion god. Now, the difference between the Israelite God and these ones is that it is that how can I put it? The, what it means for God to be cheated on by his own people is that I've married you people. I drew you out of nowhere. This is the language that God uses in the Old Testament. I think it's in Hosea. And when you see what's happening with him and Abraham came from nothing. He came from nothing. He was he came from nothing. There was nothing special about the Jewish people. He picked them. He's like, okay, it's gonna be you. You are how I am going to rescue this whole thing. Because I want you to. Because I wanted you. Um, and so he marries these people, he starts to build them up from nowhere and from nothing. And then, like for example, he takes them out of Egypt, he takes them out of slavery, and then they cheat on him. For him, it's the equivalent of having your wife, who's supposed to be faithful to you, going off and sleeping with these other men over and over again, and you win her back and you try to teach her, you give her the law, you say, okay, wife, this is how you're supposed to talk to me, this is how you take care of the house, this is how you take care of the kids. And it's not that it's not that what I'm telling you to do is wrong. It's not that the law that I'm giving you is impure. What I'm telling you to do is perfectly good. The problem is that you lack the ability to actually do it, even when you want to, because you'll have these bouts, and this is kind of mirrored in the movie Casino. Well, they'll be together and everything is fine, and then she'll slip out of bed in the middle of the night and go out and do her thing, and then they have a fight and then they make up. The thing that always happens is that there's always a remnant that's left behind them. There's always a sample of the people that manages to still hold on to their relationship with God. So it happens, the story of Noah, for example. Like, God Hulk smashes humanity, and he says, I'm not going to hold back the chaotic waters of decreation anymore. I'm not going to hold it back. I'm going to cause the flood. I'm going to wipe everyone out. I'm going to start with you. Well, I don't know what he says about Noah, but like, you're the one faithful person, right? He's the minority. He's a remnant, and he rebuilds from there. And it happens over and over again. Generally, in the Old Testament, you have Israel gets out of line, God has to allow justice and holiness to flood over, and then there's a remnant that comes back. And one of the ones that stands out to me the most would be the exiles that come back from the Babylonian exile. When Cyrus the Great frees them and they come back and they build the temple, and there's always this remnant, this piece that's left behind. Now, so this pattern keeps happening over and over again. This husband and this wife, to get into fights. She goes out into the streets, completely embarrassing him. And I can imagine the other Near Eastern gods, if they were having a conversation with Yahweh, they would be like, dude, this wife of yours, again, she's in my bed. Hmm? No, what kind of God are you? You know? And they'd be high-fiving each other, and God doesn't give up on her. And this is the part that he doesn't give up on her because he keeps what the Bible says about God is that he sees through flesh. I don't know if you can give me. He sees through flesh and bone. He's able to see the absolute truth about a person. So if you mean it, if you don't mean it, God knows. And if you do mean it, God knows. You're not going to lie to him. And every single time there's this sample of her. There is this sample of this woman. There's this little piece of her that is capable of being faithful. She wants to. And yet, despite herself, it's like she gets up and runs and runs and falls. Gets up and runs and falls. But God sees this and it moves him. With what he says about David, a broken and contrite heart. I can't turn my back on it. I can't. What God figures out, which is what Robert De Niro's character does not figure out in Casino, is that the problem with Ginger isn't that you're incapable of giving her the world. You did. The problem with Ginger, this is Sharon Stone's character. The problem with Ginger in Casino is that you are incapable of changing her nature. Her nature is that she is a harlot. That's what she is. And therefore that's what she does. You can take her off the street and put her in a mansion. She's a harlot. You can take her and clean her up and take the skanky clothes off. She's a harlot. She's a harlot. You lack the ability to change her nature. And this is the part where God steps in and rolls up his sleeve. He says, yeah, but I hold my beer. Because I can do that. I can change her nature. All I need is for her to want to be changed. All I need is for her to want to be changed. That's all I need. She's incapable of doing everything right. That's obvious. Okay? And the whole story, I believe, of the Old Testament is God just trying to ram that point home. You can't do it by yourself. I had to tell the story over like a couple of thousand years just to drive home the point. You can't do this. Okay? You can't do this. But I can. But all I need from you is that piece of yourself that genuinely wants to. Um, and so, in Casino terms, if you've watched the movie, one of the things that Robert De Niro's character finds himself having to do, because he's involved with the mob, and mob people have a tendency of disappearing in exchange for cash. What it is that he does is that he needs to place the price of his life in his wife's hands. In a safety deposit box at a bank. She is the only person who's going to have access to this key. The key that contains the money that's going to bring me back alive. I need to be able to trust you with my life. Now, he's putting his trust in this woman that he loves, who is a harlot, right? And he's trusting her that if and when the time ever came that you had to pay the price for my life, that you're going to use the money for what it's for. You're not going to take this money and run off with your old people from back in your before Christ era of your life, basically. You're not going to do that, okay? And of course she fails. And she winds up spending the money and their relationship ends. When I think about this in terms of God's relationship with us, with what he does at the cross, it's an incredible trust that he places in us. It's mind-blowing. And what God effectively is saying, he's saying, I paid this price for you. And I believe that you are capable of not squandering the value of my life. I believe that there's something inside of you that genuinely wants to have this relationship with me. I'll sort out all the legal issues. Okay? So the problems of your righteousness, the fact that you can't fulfill the law, the fact that you can't, I will sort that out. You need to get a divorce from your old pimp boyfriend, I'll handle that. You need to, I will handle the legal issues, the costs, all of that. All I need you to do is just to want to. The work of the Lord is to believe in the one he has sent. That's what you do. Just want to. How can I know that you did that, that you can do that? Noah did it. Abraham did it. Um, Jacob, even Jacob did it. Jacob was such a mess, but he did it. Um, any number of the champions, they were capable of giving me just that part. And I believe you're capable of doing it too. Right? And that's the only thing that I need. Now, what happens to a person who allows themselves to do that is something which will change your life. So in terms of this relationship then, sorry, I need to, once a person is able to understand that, what it is that they're able to do, like, I remember there was an example that I was thinking about today. Um, let's say in terms of men's relationship, husbands' relationships with their wives, every husband would know this experience. You know, when your wife calls out to your character about something, when your wife calls out and she says something in a particular kind of way that indicates to you that she's about to ask for something that's a bit extra. And she says, babe, and every husband knows what's coming. You know that she's about to ask you for something that's a bit extra. And the reason why she does that is that she is counting on your character. She knows your mind is going to tell you to do, it's not a good idea. We don't have the time. The budget isn't quite correct, but she's counting on your character, right? It's a vote of confidence. And the only way that she can do that is to believe that you're capable of that. Moses does that for us. Moses does that for us to God at the moment of the golden calf. He says to God, but you promised. And God is like, I'm done with these people. Let me, and then Moses says, no, then I'll take their place. And God, he has to relent because he promised to do so, right? What God is saying in our relationship with Jesus, he's saying that I believe, kind of put it, the the way that you'll be able to give yourself permission to be able to accept the love that I have is that deep down, it's sort of like being in love. You know if you meant it, and I know that you meant it, and that's enough. That's that's all I need from you. Just give me that part. And if you did give me that part, then you know it. You know, being in a relationship with God is like being in love. And once that happens to a person, it changes their lives to such a way that it doesn't mean that your harlot ways disappear now that you are genuinely in love with this great king. No, he's changed your nature, but your flesh is going to keep calling for you. But what's going to begin to happen is that it becomes less and less appealing. Because sin is a heavy taskmaster. It demands more and more and more and more. And even when you're out there, whatever your streets are, that's between you and your husband. I don't mean that. That's between you and God, right? That's between you and God. Certain things are between husbands and their wives. That's between you and God. I have them, you have them, everyone does. But what you realize begins to happen once this internal transformation has happened. Once you've given this thing to God, this little piece of yourself that you said, God, I believe everything you say about me. I accept everything you believe about me. All of that is that the things that you used to enjoy so much more before become less appealing. You know, like I would compare it to um it's like every love song you've ever heard. It's like the one that's on my mind was Tony Braxton, What's Good. Maybe if you have Spotify, just look it up. Tony Braxton, What's Good. Is this woman talking about this man of hers? It's just like, but this is different. Like, ladies, I look, I've been out there. know. And if you're anything like me, if you're a harlot like me, I've been out there. I've been around the block. My body count is high. Okay, I've been ran through, but I'm telling you right now, this man, like I might be out there, I might be with you, and I might be non-sober. But I have to go back home. This man loves me too much. He's too good to me. Um, or in husband terms, like I have to go home. This wife of mine, she's too good. Um, and it's not that I want to go back to her because I feel guilty, but because I'm so loved, you know, because I want to get out of here. I want to go back to my clean sheets. I want to go back to my warm shower. I want to go back to my walk-in closet. And it's not because I'm after those things. It's this man. He treats me with a love that I can't let go of it once it's touched me, you know? And again, it's a thing. And I'm not going to ask you to do not raise your hands. Um, but if you're a wife in this room and you're married to a man who has who has submitted himself to trying to be in the image of Christ, you would know what that's like, despite himself, because you know him, you know what he is. He's flawed. He's everything that he is. But if you are married to that sort of guy, you know, you know, and I'm married to that sort of God. I, I I'm tempted, Rob, but man, that love is too good.
That is the gospel according to Reta. It's your mind is a fascinating place, Reta, and I do think I need to wrap up. I'm just thinking time wise, but I wonder if you can sessions with Reta are, after this are paid for, so you can sign up at the back. Reta, I really have always appreciated your grasp of. I don't get your infatuation with sci-fi. I think it's a complete waste of your brain. But nevertheless, that's your cross to bear. Those are your streets, and you should avoid them. Folks, I wonder if where you're sitting, if you won't just bow your heads, and I'm going to ask Reta just to pray for us, to commit us to the Lord. We won't sing a closing song, but I'm going to ask him to just commit us with our fickle devotion that is so precious to God, because it is fickle, but it is precious. And commit us to the Lord, Reta.
Um, my God, what it is that I pray for myself and every single person in here is that if I am going to be able to have anything of a healthy relationship with you, Jesus, is that I would be so radical and be so humble as to allow myself to see you, to, to see myself the way you see me, to listen to myself the way you listen to me, to feel for myself the way you feel towards me, to treat myself the way you treat me, and to genuinely believe that. To come home after a night out on the town, whatever that looks like, and my wife and my husband opens the door and he looks at me and he says, I've been expecting you. And he's not angry. He's not bitter. He's upset, sure. And I can see the pain in his eyes that I did this. But he's not surprised by it because he knows where I've come from. He understands my past and he appreciates just how difficult it is for me to be a good wife in this world. The temptations, the burdens, the difficulties, the distractions, the speed with which we live our lives, the desperation, the insecurities that we face that tempt us to look to other ways to being protected. I can't think of any number of people in this room right now who are going through things as a result of the events in this country alone. Things that are tempting them to look to other means and other ways outside of you for protection or for help or for peace, protection or solace, right? This is us being tempted as your wife. But we get tempted, we go out, and then when we're out there in the wilderness, in the cold, in the dark, we remember I have a husband back home, and he loves me so much. And the only thing that he wants from me is for me to accept his love. That's the only thing he wants me to do, and he believes I'm capable of doing so, and I've done it before. I just want to go home. I'm desperate, and I arrive there. My makeup is running down my face. I'm crying and I'm bawling and I'm begging for him to take me back. And every time I'm scared that he won't, but I mean it. I genuinely mean it. And he's moved by that. It reminds me of that moment when Jesus was walking through the throng of people, and the woman with the issue of blood touches the hem of his robe. And he says, somebody touched me. There's a million people touching me. He says, somebody touched me. It was a broken and contrite heart, a heart that meant it, that touched him. And when I move towards you in that sort of heart, in that sort of posture of a heart, you are touched. Just like a good husband is touched by the cries and the needs of his lovely wife. You're moved. You can't just stand back and not do anything. You have to step in. You find yourself compelled to love me, to take me in, clean me off, dress me up. And you'll say to me, we'll talk about this tomorrow. I love you. This is your home. This is where you belong. All I ask from you is for you to mean it, and I can tell. I know you mean it. So I accept that from you. Let's keep building, my love. Let's keep building. And every day I'll wash you. I'll wash you with the word. I'll sanctify you. That's what it means. I'll continue to teach you. All I ask is listen to me. I'll continue to lead you. All I ask is follow me. Let me show you who you are. You're not that person you were before. You don't belong in the streets. You belong in this house. Let me teach you how to be a woman of this house. Let me teach you how to be a proper mother of this house, a pillar of the community, as my wife, so that these other people that are out there, that are following these false gods, that are married to these wrong husbands of gods, as it were, they'll look at you and say, I want a husband just like that. I want a husband who treats me that well. A husband whose burden is easy and whose yoke is light. It's not that my husband doesn't expect me to be a certain kind of wife. No, but he doesn't beat it into me. He loves it out of me. All he wants from me is to accept that love. And once I begin to do that, I want to be a good wife to him. I want to be a good wife to him. And I pray that that's what we will allow ourselves to do. Be so radical as to accept your love, and then we stand back and watch what happens as you transform into this beautiful person that we never thought we were capable of being. So that when we see it happening, as Paul says, we don't boast. We don't boast. Our husband did this. He loved me like that. That's why I am this way. You want a husband just like this. Amen.
Excellent. Thank you, Reta. Can we just thank Reta? That was good. There's tea and coffee through here, but perhaps you need to sit for a while and just think through. That's cool. We'll keep the kids going for just a few more moments, but sometimes you just do. You're just like, I need a minute or two before I leave. If you need a minute or two, stick around. If you want tea and coffee, join us through here. Otherwise, we'll see you next week, Sunday. God bless you, folks. Thanks for coming. Sorry, Steve just wanted to say something very briefly.
Morning, everybody. So Rob celebrates his birthday tomorrow, and I want to thank, and I just want to honor Rob. You know, we had that vision 2020, I think it was, where we had the root deep down, and I was asking God for a word for Rob, and the word I got for him was, you're an oak as in guy, but also oak as in oak tree, and your roots take us deep, and because your roots are deep, we're deep, and I think our whole church can agree with me that you are a man of God, and God is extremely proud of you. And we love you very much. So happy birthday, Robert. So, I feel really embarrassed. The ladies come up with nice fancy, I come up with an envelope. Happy birthday, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I turn 24 tomorrow. It's going to be memorable. Please help yourself. What we do normally say is take one for somebody, a woman, but this year, once you get the gift, you'll see that we haven't been able to do that. So for now, it's just everyone who's here. Next week, we'll have everyone who's here. And if there are any left after that, we'll hand them out. So please be kind. Help yourself here if you're a woman. God bless you. Have a lekker day.